You're listening to the Final Say Radio Show, a Rappaport Media production, with your host Brett Rappaport and co-host John Rappaport.
Our first guest today is Mark Langfan, and he's a returning guest to the Final Say Radio Show, and it's a pleasure. And Mark is the president of Americans for a Safe Israel. And John shared with me earlier this morning a new op-ed that Mark has in Aruch Shiva, the IsraeliNationalNews.com, if you want to check it out. And it's called Israel's Perceived Weakness Fuels the Terror Machine. Mark, as always, it's a pleasure to have you on the Final Say Radio Show. Welcome back.
Pleasure to be with you guys.
Well, this is interesting, and I think what makes it so interesting, Mark, what you've written here, is the fact that we seem to be fighting, I'm talking about here in America, we're fighting this war on terrorism that was clearly defined and clearly declared, and it's almost like the only state that reminds itself on a day-in and day-out basis that this is a war that's never going away is Israel. And I think the Western leaders, in particular, I would say Barack Obama and a lot of these fellows throughout Europe, I'm not sure what they're thinking and what their lack of focus is. But my gosh, you got to understand what you're doing with some of these policy changes. And you pointed out so rightly so, Benjamin Netanyahu clearly understands this issue.
Benjamin Netanyahu understands it, but we are in a real terrible situation all the way around, in that Israel has been fighting a war with terrorists, but America and most of Europe has been forcing Israel over the years to make peace with these terrorists. So what has happened is really almost the worst of all worlds. Israel was fighting a war on terrorism, and it used to be Israel's motto was, we're not going to negotiate with terrorists, and if they touch an Israeli or they touch a Jew, we're going to come after them. Well, lo and behold, Israel, with America's unfortunate aid, turned Yasser Arafat, which is the biggest terrorist in the world, into a quote-unquote peacemaker. So we've really thrown this entire, what used to be a very clear, you don't negotiate with terrorists because you're going to, if you give terrorists what they want, they're going to do terrorism more in another way or the same way to extract more. So what's gone on is, with all of these terrible prisoner exchanges that Israel has done, you're now seeing that milieu bleed into the American scene, where you've got people on the TV saying, well, negotiating with terrorists is okay because, look, Israel does. And it's a horrible model that we forced on the Israelis, and now Barack Obama is forcing on us. So, and by the way, on the Barack Obama prisoner swap, not only are there problems with how this soldier became a prisoner to begin with, but I think it goes actually much, much deeper than that, in that if people aren't connecting last week's talk at West Point by Obama and the prisoner release. In Obama's West Point speech, he basically said that they're leaving Afghanistan. And so I'm tying the two events together. I think that what went on is something actually a lot worse than just a prisoner swap. I think we've actually somehow, behind the scenes, it turns out we've been negotiating with the Taliban for 3 years. I think we have done, or Obama has done something where he has not really told the American people or even Congress what he's actually agreed to with the Taliban. So we are in a terrible situation. Israel has been forced to negotiate with terrorists, and now we're negotiating with terrorists.
I think you're spot on. We have absolutely forced them to negotiate with terrorists. And I'm glad you brought up Yasser Arafat, because it speaks volumes, Mark, to the transition that we have seen where the leftists, both in this country and the global progressive leftists, the folks that George Soros and similar monies try to back, are complicitous in all this, because these are the folks who turn, and they turn somebody like Yasser Arafat, as you said, into the winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, the godfather of modern terrorism. The PLO is still a terrorist organization, despite any of our wishful thinking or pronouncements by our own feckless government that they're not. One need look no further than some of the Palestinian media watch outlets who continuously monitor what they say to their own people. I don't care what they say to me. I expect my enemies to lie to me. I want to know what they say.
They're not even lying. They're not even lying so much. And
they're not.
Yasser Arafat, you were saying?
No. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say on Yasser Arafat, I always talk about how Yasser Arafat and Osama bin Laden are really two in the same. And what I say is, does anyone know how many times Yasser Arafat came to the White House? It was God only. I think he had the most Lincoln Room evenings in the White House as anybody. He had the most official visits to the White House. So I always say, why did Osama bin Laden do 9/11? Well, he sees this Yasser Arafat getting all of these invites to the White House because he's done all of this terrorism. So he first knocks off a couple of our embassies in Africa, levels them to the ground, and he still doesn't get an invite. So finally, and it's a joke, but unfortunately it's what happened, and it's a tragedy, and it's a catastrophe. But he says, what does a good terrorist have to do to get invited to the White House? And so he says, I'll attack 9/11. Just thank God we had Bush on hand to have handled the aftermath of 9/11. Could you imagine President Barack Obama, reacting to a 9/11 in this country? He would say, it's our fault. This is what he has done. He has turned this great protector of democracy and freedom everywhere into the butt of jokes. Who, whether you're an ally of America or you're an enemy of America, who would rely on this guy? He's not protecting anybody. He's creating danger for every ally we have ever had.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. Now, Clinton, in my never to be humble opinion, taught the terrorists that there is a reward for terrorism. It's going to be a smaller U.S. military, and as you clearly pointed out, and that is a fact, he had the most visits, the most sleepovers. I mean, he might as well have had his own little Yasser Arafat footsie pajamas hanging in the closet of the Lincoln bedroom.
Yeah, the initialed in Arabic.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I want to transition this slightly because there's a very important matter going on here. We have I don't know how else to say it, but the PLO family reunion. We have Hamas, who overtly is still committed in every way, shape, and form, including very recent commentary, to Israel's complete and total destruction. There is no separation from there is no green line in their opinion. The green line is not one Jew having a foot anywhere in the Holy Land. To Fatah, who is really just a lighter version of a terrorist organization, but both are committed to Israel's destruction.
They're terrorists, as Naftali Bennett said, they're terrorists in suits.
Yes, absolutely. They're well-dressed suits. It's funny you say that. That's
they're
the first
well-dressed.
reaction.
By the way, the reason why they're so well-dressed is because American taxpayers are paying our good tax dollars in the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars each year to have them get tailored suits.
Now, I'm glad
we're sending hundreds of millions of dollars to these terrorists, and the American Congress is not doing its job, the Republicans or the Democrats, to stop this rape of the American taxpayer. It is disgusting that this country pays hundreds of millions of dollars to the PLO and to the PA. And what do we get? The incitement on the PA public radio and TV is nauseating. And we just give them the hundreds of millions of dollars. And so they walk around with these fancy suits.
Now, I want to ask you a question, and I really want to get your analysis on them. And I hand you back to Brett, who I'm sure has a few of his own. So first off, remember that these are the people who danced on the vaporized graves of our 9/11 victims, and giving them millions is horrible. But I want to point something out.
Absolutely. I've got video of that. I'll send you the video.
Yeah, it's awful.
I'll send you video of that.
Yeah, please do. We'll post it on
I'll send you video. When you see the video, it's pathological that these are the people we're sending hundreds of millions of dollars to.
It is, but now let's focus on our Secretary of State, John Kerry. So Kerry, of course, called Netanyahu because he somehow expects that the puppet's going to continue to dance or be forced to dance. The State Department has made it clear now that they have no plans to cut aid, despite the fact that we've got at least a handful of U.S. lawmakers who are saying, you nuts, stop giving money to these terrorists. And what's basically being said by our State Department, again, our suicidal, feckless, pathetic State Department, is that we're going to judge them by their actions. Well, I want to call Kerry and the Obama administration on their words. You can judge them by their actions. They have already shown themselves by their actions to be terrorists. They are taking American dollars against our law, and they are paying stipends to terrorists who have blood of Israeli men, women, and children, and American men, women, and children on their hands. So here's the question I have for you, Mark. What do you see coming from, and what would you advise a non-feckless Obama administration? Let me state it another way. What would you advise the rational men and women, conservatives and liberals, Democrats alike, and many of them do care deeply for Israel? What would you advise them to do to help work around this president's policies to ensure that the U.S. does not give tacit approval to the world, which will very quickly then turn around and treat even Hamas as maybe an apartheid state peace organization that's subject to the jackboots of Israeli thugs?
Well, on this one, there's a bunch of things you can do. The first and foremost, and believe it or not, the EU is actually even inching to this, is not just to focus on the money going to pay for the terrorists where they are in jail for murdering Americans and for Israelis, but to go after the graft and the money that is going into the very pocket of the Abbas and all of his henchmen, where they're basically robbing all of this money from the Palestinians themselves. And we have to remember, there are Palestinians or Arabs or whatever you want to call them living in these areas that need help. And one of the reasons they need help is because the Arab Ummah has forsaken them and has used them as a tool, not for their betterment, but as a tool to destroy Israel. So you have Palestinians living in these terrible camps because they have refused to build normal buildings for themselves so that they can stop being refugees. So these people live in terrible squalor, so they need help. But what the problem is you have these the PA that takes the money that is destined to help these people and robs them. They're not interested in helping these Palestinians. They're helping in feathering their bank accounts. So number one, I would demand audits of all the monies down to the last penny that gets sent to the PA, because you're not going to, it's going to be very difficult with this president to stop the money altogether. And I would again say we should urge stopping the money altogether. But as a legislator, I would say the best thing to do is to demand an accounting and to expose the Palestinian graft inside of the Palestinian PA and of Abbas himself. Again, all you need to do is go to the Hamas charter as well as the as well as the PLO charter. And a lot of people think the PLO charter has been changed. That is a myth. It's a myth because the PLO charter requires a specific vote for specific amendments to the charter, and that has never even happened. But again, the real pressure point here is this government, our American government, promised Israel, apparently, that they were not going to recognize the PA with a unity government. So Bibi Netanyahu comes out and says he's been promised that the Americans are not going to recognize the PA soon. That's what he said. So what happens the very day Bibi says this? Kerry comes out and says, we're going to work with the Palestinians immediately. So let's understand the difference between the word recognize and work with the Palestinian government immediately. There turns out to be no functional difference. So Bibi Netanyahu looks like a total putz for having relied on Obama for anything.
Well, I gotta be fair here. At this point, he should understand that you can't trust Barack Obama. I mean, I can't think of any world leader who could sit here with a straight face and tell you that.
Right.
I mean, Vladimir Putin, Angela Merkel, both of the prime ministers over in Britain. I mean, there's so many different world leaders walk away from these meetings being told one thing to end up with egg on their face. And I think that's one of the greatest problems for the United States right now is that the level of credibility of this administration is at
zero.
Probably record lows. Yeah, if not zero. But here's the thing. If I stepped back from this and wasn't preaching from one particular side and I was looking at these issues, I would say, okay, well, here's the problem. You know, you look at the United States, which has spent $17 trillion on a war on poverty, and the poverty rate's the same. And then we look at the hundreds of millions of dollars each and every year, which is actually billions and billions of dollars, which have been given in aid to the PLO or to Hamas or to whoever. And have they properly provided the most basic fundamental needs and human acts of kindness, if you will, to their own people? And the answer, I think, would have to be no. And I think that's the greatest problem. And I got to tell you, Mark, what drives me nuts is when I open up the paper.
And I wasn't saying, but I just want to say, I wasn't saying we should give the money.
No. I understood what you said. Yeah.
I was just saying, as a legislator, you know, you got to have at least, you know, some twist that you can try to dig into.
No, I think at this point we could clearly recognize that just like in the United States where we have a $4 trillion a year budget and everything's still broken and clearly there's too much corruption, and you look at Ukraine, which, you know, their government toppled because of corruption, that clearly there's too much corruption within the different governmental factions in the West Bank and in Gaza. Yeah, I mean, so stop throwing money at it all.
Wait a second. Can you imagine the VA, which is supposed to be the exemplar of well-managed, well-thought-out medical care? Could you imagine Obamacare, where we can't get the VA medical care straight, but we're taking on the whole country's medical care? I mean, this is how absolutely insane Obama has taken this country. There isn't a single thing that you can look at and say it's better. As a matter of fact, everything you could say has gone to hell in a handbasket.
I agree with that. Now, let me ask you this, because it seems to me, and we've looked at so many different stories and reports of the different border points that go from Israel to the West Bank and from Israel into Gaza. And there are a lot of, hundreds and thousands or millions, I guess, tons of food and clothing and supplies and other materials, which Israel themselves drives or ships into these areas so these people could go about their business. And on the other hand, you have all the tunnels coming in from Egypt, and then you have all the boats that sneak in through the ocean and from other places, which for the most part, for the most part, are carrying weapons which are meant to be used to wage war and acts of terrorism and not take care of their people, which is they go to the UN, and that's the big complaint. Oh, it's a human rights issue. Well, here's the human rights issue. Get rid of the people who are leading these areas, and everything will fix itself.
You are 100% right. And by the way, nothing could be more clear than people say, "What's the solution? What's the solution? What's the solution?" I'll tell you, I got the solution. It's a very simple solution. Let's go to the Golan Heights. Let's look at that line in the Golan Heights. To the west of that line, you have Israel. Okay, and what is Israel doing? Israel has been giving medical care for free to thousands and thousands of Syrians who have been harmed in Syria. Now, what's going on to the east of that line? You've got Assad, who is dropping chemical chlorine bombs on his people, and chlorine is a specifically designated weapon of mass destruction under the Geneva Protocols after World War I, because that was the weapon that they really used in World War I was chlorine. And Syria is a signatory of that. Iran is a signatory of that. And Russia is a signatory of that. Where is this country calling the people who are using chemical weapons to kill criminals? No one's mentioning that. So to the east, you have bedlam and mayhem and people mass murdering others. And on the west, on Israel's side of the line, you have Israelis giving medical care. But the world is attacking Israel and is saying Israel is an apartheid state and is saying Israel is this. It's the sickest. It is an Orwellian world where truth is lie and lie is truth, and everything is opposite.
Absolutely. Now, Mark, we have literally about 2.5 minutes to the end of the program, but let's be clear about this. Which administration and which person referred to Israel and the apartheid state? I mean, and others. I mean, it's incredible how many times.
Kerry.
Oh, it's just shocking. It's shocking.
It is beyond a sick comparison where you have Israel, where the people vote, and I mean, my analogy is this: let's say you had Germany, and Germany is far away, and than America. And by the way, this goes to the exact beginning of what we were talking about in terms of the Taliban. What we have done is we have, instead of defeating the Taliban, we have empowered the Taliban and, in fact, defeated ourselves. Mm-hmm. In World War II, the Germans and the Japanese said, yes, we lost, you won, and we're going to change our ways.
Yep.
The problem with Yasser Arafat and the Taliban is they never changed their ways, but we're declaring them the winners.
Well, as this president said, he doesn't believe in victory, and he certainly likes to lead from behind. And
he does not believe in victory.
I just wish the American people would take him at his word. Anyway, Mark, it's been great.
We just listen to him.
Exactly. Mark, it's been great speaking with you.
He says what he means most of the time.
Mark, give us a website so people could follow you and what you're doing.
www.marklangfan.com.
Excellent.
Mark Langfan, exactly as it's spelled.
Okay.
Or exactly
Mark,
as it sounds.
and we'll post that out there. Mark, great stuff as
All
always.
right.
We'll talk to you soon, buddy.
God bless you guys. Doing a great job. Thank
you too, Mark. Take care. Oh, sorry. That was Mark Langfan, the president of Americans for a Safe Israel, our first guest today.